got another boost when Chevrolet's chief engineer Edward Cole became division manager. Cole was no stranger to innovation and was intrigued by the air-cooled concept for a GM car. Besides, it was probably upsetting, to say the least, to GM's president, Harlow H. Curtis, that Tiny American Motors was outselling several of its models with its own lineup of compacts. And so work on GM's compact began in 1958. Introduction was set for 1960.
But I could have never lived without him. He gave me every opportunity to be anything I wanted to be, which I have a list of all the things I failed at. But I have a Corvair. It's in a barn. Someday my son, Edward Nicholas Cole Jr., is going to restore it along with the 2 Corvettes that are there. And a basic transportation vehicle from somewhere in Asia. But we lived a great life in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. I got to be Queen of the May. It was wonderful. And I thank General Motors, and when my husband was president, was the world's largest corporation, employing the most people and also the most profitable. I don't know what the hell happened. But Ed Whitaker seems to have things pretty much under control. In his history, he was a lineman for AT&T before he ran it. And he's a good guy. He has a ranch in San Antonio. And he doesn't know a thing about cars. But he can count, which is improvement. If Edward Cole were alive, he would be the most miserable person in the world and really hard to live with, because he lived and breathed General Motors. They could have gotten him to work for nothing, but God knows I'd never tell him that. And his pride and joy was the Corvair. And I just read that book, and it's wrong. They said that the Corvair was not what it was supposed to be. And all of you, of course, have heard of that nice gentleman, Ralph Nader. Well, I must tell you, General Motors had evidence that Ralph Nader falsified the back axle going out on a Corvair. And the gutless wonders like Fred Donner and Jim Roach voted not to pursue it because they said, it'll be the big corporation against the little man. And of course, in that, they made Ralph Nader. Yeah. Edward Cole debated Ralph Nader on Phil Donahue's show, and he put him in the water because he lived on sound bites, knew nothing about cars. My God, he didn't even own one and gave up driving, probably because he didn't know how. But the Corvair was the first economy car made in the United States that got the gas mileage they're looking for now. And it was a great car. My kids went through college and through high school with Corvairs. And nobody ever questioned that they could get through the snow and the other kids in Michigan couldn't. And we thought it was quite a joke. But what I wanted to do was bring Ed Cole closer to all of you. As I said, he had a great sense of humor. And after Edward died, I had to go through his desk. And do you see my, yes, that's it. This was the book that I found. It has his name on it, with these papers. Fortunately, these are fresh copies. But these jokes were in this. And he had a little letter that said, keep these, they're my favorite jokes. So I'd like to share with you Ed Cole's sense of humor. Now, when we get to about part of the stories, I will use some language that Oh, I'm familiar with it. But I don't use it. My kids do, though. And as we had barbecue this evening, this seemed apropos to start with this. And when you all get bored, just let me know, I can quit. For those of you who have lived in Texas, you know how true this is. They actually have chili cook-offs in Texas. And it's always around Halloween time, and I don't know why. I was, so this man said, standing up trying to find out directions, and they said, "Oh, we want you. We've lost our third chili cook-off judge, and you're just perfect for the part. It's not too spicy. You'll love it." So, the first chili that I tasted was called Mike's Maniac Monster Chili. And the first judge said, "Oh, it's a little too heavy on the tomatoes, but it has a amusing flavor." The second judge said, "Nice, smooth tomato flavor, very mild." And I said, "Holy crap. What the hell is in this stuff?" You could remove dry paint from your driveway. One of the bonuses in taking the job as one of the judges was I could have a beer between every tasting. Took me 2 beers to put the flames out. I hope that's the worst one. Chili number 2. Austin's Afterburner chili. Judge number 1 said, "Smoky with a hint of pork, slightly jalapeno tang." Judge number 2 said, "Exciting barbecue flavor, needs more pepper to be taken seriously." I said, "Keep this out of the reach of children. I'm not sure I'm supposed to taste something besides pain." I had to wave off 2 people who wanted to give me the Heimlich. They had to rush more beers to me. Chili number 3. Fred's famous burn down the barn chili. Judge number 1, excellent firehouse chili, great kick. Judge number 2, a bit salty, good use of peppers. I said, "Call the EPA, I've located a uranium spill." My nose feels like I've been snorting Drano. Everyone knows the routine by now. Give me more beer before I ignite. Barmaids pounded me on the back, and now my backbone is in the front part of my chest. I'm getting shit-faced from all that beer. Chili number 4. Bubba's Black Magic. Judge number 1, Black Magic chili with almost no spice, uninteresting. Judge number 2, hint of lime in the beans, good side dish for fish or other mild foods. Not much of chili. I said, I felt something scraping across my tongue, but it was unable to taste it. It is possible to burn out taste buds, I think. Sally, the beer maid, was standing behind me with fresh refills. This 300-pound woman is starting to look hot. I'm eating an aphrodisiac. Chili number 5. Lisa Legal Lip Remover. Meaty, said the first judge. Strong chili, cayenne peppers, freshly ground, adding considerable kick. Very impressive. Judge number 2. Chili using shredded beef could use more tomato. Must admit the cayenne peppers make a strong statement. I said, my ears are ringing, sweat is pouring off my brow. My forehead feels like a fire, and I can no longer focus my eyes. I farted and 4 people behind me needed paramedics. I've read this so many times and I just fall apart. The other contestants offered me more beer, and she was rather tired. I was sure my tongue was bleeding, and she was now pouring beer directly onto it out of a pitcher. I wondered if I'm burning my lips. It really ticks me off that the other judges asked me to stop screaming. Screw them. Chili number 6, Kira's Very Vegetarian Variety. Judge number 1, thin yet bold, vegetarian chili, good balance of spices and peppers. Judge number 2, the best yet, aggressive use of peppers, onions, garlic. Superb. I said, my intestines are now straight as my intestines are now a straight pipe filled with gaseous sulfuric fumes. I crapped on myself when I my children are here. Let's see. And I'm worrying it will eat through the chair. No one seems inclined to stand behind me. I can't feel my lips anymore. I'll skip that. Number 7, Susan's Screaming Sensation Chili. Judge number 1. A mediocre chili with too much reliance on canned peppers. Judge number 2. Ho ho. Tastes as if the chef literally threw it in a can of chili peppers at the last minute. Take note that I'm worried about judge number 3. He appears to be a bit in distress and is cussing uncontrollably. I said, you could put a grenade in my mouth, pull the pin, and I wouldn't feel a thing. I've lost sight in one eye, and the world sounds like it's made of rushing water. My shirt is covered with chili, which slid unnoticed out of my mouth. My pants are full of lava to match my shirt. At least during the autopsy, they'll know what killed me. I just decided to stop breathing. It's too painful. Screw it, I'm not getting any oxygen anyway. If I need air, I'll just suck it through the 4-inch hole in my stomach. Chili number 8. Stop, Bobby. May I have my Chili number 8. Big Tom's toenail curling chili. That's number 1. The perfect ending. This is a nice bland chili, not too bold, but spicy enough to declare its existence. Judge number 2. This final entry is good. Balanced chili, neither mild nor hot. Sorry to see that most of it was lost when judge number 3 farted. Oh dear. Passed out and fell over and the chili pot on top of himself. Not sure if he's going to make it. Poor fellow. Wonder how he'd have reacted to hot chili. I said nothing. I just wanted to die. These are words of wisdom from Edward Cole. Work like you don't need the money. Sing like no one can hear you. Love like you've never been hurt before. Dance like no one can see you. And drive it like you stole it. Okay, I'll save the best to the last. It's was Edward's favorite joke. I was the noon speaker at the SAE convention every year for years in Detroit. And I read this joke, and I said, this is Edward Cole's favorite joke. And I was never asked back again. There's good and bad in that. Engineers usually have no sense of humor, and honestly, I think it was the chairman of the board who really didn't have a sense of humor. As you know, the Scheidt family, and I have to watch that, has moved to Georgia to be near my dad, Scheidt. Now you can guess what I'm saying. We miss all of you so much. Just wanted to bring you up to date on the Scheidt family. Except at the SAE convention, I didn't say Scheidt, I said Shed. Down here, we Scheidts have learned that to err is human, but to forgive is unlikely. After looking around, you realize that in about 40 years, we'll have millions of old ladies running around with tattoos, pierced navels. Now, that's scary notion. One thing that Noah Scheidt learned when she joined high society was that the money can buy you happiness, but somehow it's more comfortable to cry in a Corvette or a Corvair, not a Kia. That little Scheidt even told me, after a certain age, if you don't wake up aching somewhere, you may be dead. The fertilizer magnet, my brother, Scheidt Jr., who married, Scheidt, didn't come with us because their new baby son, full of Scheidt, just wasn't old enough to make the trip. They have 5 children, Holy Scheidt, Give a Scheidt, Full Scheidt, and of course the twins, Deep Scheidt and Dip Scheidt. The last son is really not too bright and should have been named Dumb Scheidt. If you recall, my other brother, who is engaged to Pizza Scheidt, his Italian fiancée, they will join us after their wedding. The wedding announcement was all in the papers, giving the date of the Scheidt Happens nuptials. So all is well with the Scheidt family. Maybe next time I'll tell you what happened to my cousin, No Shit Sherlock. And some of the others. Right now, I have to go tell you about the chili cook-off. Now, if there are any questions, as long as they're not too personal, and then I'd answer those too. I would be happy to tell you anything you want to know about Ed Cole. And by the way, I didn't meet him in a modeling agency. I was an industrial engineer, and I met him through Roger, God, what was his last name? I'm 80 years old, I can't remember my own name. He was an executive vice president, Roger Keyes, and I met him at a car show in New York. And he took me to a Broadway play. In the middle of the play, he turned to me and said, "Do you want to get married?" I said, "I am married." He said, "I am too." And we both got divorced, and we both got married. That was fine, except I found out how much I was worth to my first husband. He wanted $1 million from me, and I didn't really think I was worth that much. But to get to marry Ed Cole, I was happy to pay up. I don't know what his first wife cost him, but probably a lot. But we had a great marriage. We both loved to fish. He liked to hunt. I just went there, and I knew better not to outshoot him, or I'd be there shooting after dark.
There to fix the killer.
You can't believe how surprised I was when I read that joke in here. I didn't know he was that funny. But it was great. We have 4 children. My oldest child is 60. My next child is a daughter. Oh, he's a professor of chemistry. My daughter is a divorce lawyer, so if any of you all are not getting along, she practices, she's licensed in 5 states, but her office is in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, where all the houses are for sale. And they'll probably be for sale for the next 3 years till we have an election. Sorry, you Democrats, I'm not one of them. Anyway, what's my next one? Oh, he was a stockbroker, and he called me and said, I can't do this anymore. To call someone up and tell them they just lost their money, it's just more than I can take. And he said, and by the way, you lost $5 million today when General Motors went bankrupt. And I said, what about those other people? What about your mother? I said, you'll just inherit less. And my last son is 43. His name is Edward Nicholas Cole, Jr. He is probably as good an engineer as his father was. And he rebuilds my D8s and my backhoes, and he used to race Corvettes. Now he races something because he's got a full-time job with my ranches, and he races cattle. He's now into hobby racing. He races a car that's an old Chevelle. This is a year, you know, you can't race new cars, in other words, and they've got such limitations. The car looks as if it was the loser in a demolition derby. It is god-awful. And I just bought a $4,700 engine to go in it. So this piece of you-know-what is running around the track with everything. So, what do you want to know about Ed Cole? I know a lot of dirt on everybody. What do you Pardon?
What was his favorite of all the years?
The Spider that was made in Canada. I think they made 225 of them. It's in my barn. But we've had several, but it's the ones the kids went to school with, and they weren't worth a dip when they got through with them. Come on, don't you want to know about my husband? I spent a lot of time with him.
So he was a pilot, and you guys had a twin-engine Beagle?
Yes, that's how he was killed. We had a twin-engine Beagle, which is an English airplane with 2 Rolls-Royce engines, and we'd bought the Checker Motor Company in Kalamazoo, and it was May the 2nd, 1977, so it's been a long, long time. And he was flying to work. And normally I flew with him every day, but I have an orphanage in Detroit, and I was collecting furniture from some of my friends to redo a playroom, so I wasn't with him. And it's very funny about things like that. Not funny, tragic, I guess. But my maid came out of the house when I pulled up in a 2.5-ton truck. I can really drive a semi. This may shock you. Not very well, but people get out of my way. The minute she came out in the driveway and said, "You're wanted on the phone from Kalamazoo," I knew. And I think he had a heart attack because he had not been well the day before. He had a work ethic that is unbelievable. I got up every morning to fix breakfast for him at 5 o'clock. His driver was in the driveway by 5:30. He left for the office at 5:45. He even turned the lights on, I think. But he just worked, and then at 7 or 8 o'clock, the driver would call and say, "Mrs. Cole, would you tell Mr. Cole to come home? I'd like to go to my daughter's wedding or something." And so I'd call and say, "If you want dinner, you better come home." So that's the way it went. Yes?
Would you recount the story of how you got his desk?
Oh, yes. As you might imagine, I'm never a shy, retiring person. And when my husband retired from General Motors, he had a beautiful desk, but all the desks on the 14th floor of the General Motors building were identical. So were the cadenzas. I mean, everything was the same, including the blotter. They were sort of locked into that. And you never saw a scrap of paper anywhere. I wonder if they ran it out of a closet, I don't know. And I decided that I wanted to give him his General Motors desk for a gift for his birthday after he retired. So I went up and asked the powers that be if I could buy the desk. And they said, no, we don't sell those. And I said, really? I know every guard in this building. I've helped some of their families out. They owe me, and they'll help me get the desk out. So sell it to me, or you'll put me in jail for stealing. So they sold it to me. And it's now my desk in my house. It's got lots of papers on it. Oh by the way, my husband was a neat freak, and I am. Build another warehouse, throw it in there. I really am addicted to auctions. I don't drink, and I don't go to a psychiatrist, but boy, do I go to auctions. I go to buy cow manure, you know. It's really terrible, it's a sickness. Anything else? I can't believe you know more about him.
What's
Yes,
your
sir.
favorite Corvair?
She didn't ask.
No, hers.
The one full of gas. Come on, ladies, don't you want to know what it's like to be Queen of the May? I got to tell you, it was terrific.
What was the most embarrassing thing that happened to you while you were being the Queen of the May?
Oh, boy. Let me count the ways. My husband wanted to put a sock in my mouth so many times. It was just awful. But until he became president, I kept my mouth shut, and I wore my white gloves, my little pillbox hat, and looked like a poor little girl. And I always wore my clothes at that time one size too large, because all of my peers were a little older, a little fatter, and I didn't want to make them mad. And they got, you know, you would not, like Christina Ford was never, well, she shouldn't have been accepted. Christina was a nut. But she always wore the tightest clothes, and she combed her hair with an egg beater. But when she and Henry got divorced, I helped her move out of the house. Want to know what she got as a settlement? When all of my, she got $15 million, and at that time it was peanuts for what she could have gotten. The third wife, she got the use of the Ford Motor Company airplane and more money than God, and and she was a model, by the way. She also owned a bar, and Henry liked to drink. But the most embarrassing, probably when I got up to make a speech, as he sat there. Oh no, the most embarrassing, I was doing, let's see, what was the college? Missouri Valley College. I was giving the commencement address. And at that time, they were rioting on the campus, and they were tearing up the bookstore, and they took me around the back way, but I could see these kids throwing the books on the floor and everything. And as I got up to the same ones that were in the audience, in the football stadium, actually, I gave it, I said, behind every book-throwing, placard-carrying college kid is a mother and father and home working their ass off keeping you in school. That was printed in Time magazine. Oh, yeah. Or the time I called in to Phil Donahue's show, when they had Ralph Nader's and Hinchman on the show. And when I called in, they said, and your name is? I said, Mrs. Edward Cole. My husband is president of General Motors. And they said, sure. And I said, no, really. And they put me then on the air, and I began to ask this man some questions. And by the way, I had been given a safety course at General Motors and every other course you can have to know what to say. Well, they just didn't teach me very well. And so I ended up arguing with this man on the air. The difference was I knew what I was talking about, he didn't have a clue. So Phil asked me if I would get my husband to debate Nader, and I said, certainly. Well, that night when Edward came home, it seems like they had heard the show in the General Motors building and they all went to see it. They had televisions in every office. And Edward said, when he came through the door, well, what did you do today? And I said, oh, not much. He said, the PR department said you did. And he said, I'll go on the show if you'll go on first. So I made arrangements with Phil to go down and do the show with him. And I'm the biggest bargain hunter in the world. If you got a flea market around, I know where it is. And I also go to shoe places where shoes are on wholesale. I had a terrible argument with Zsa-Zsa Gabor about that on another television show. But I propped my foot up so people could see the $9.95 tag on the bottom of my shoe. But then my husband debated Nader in Detroit, and as I said, buried him. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Since I really don't know how things fell down in the years, I was just wondering if you were around in Phil's life when he had the epiphany to build a Corvair. And when did you first hear about it?
The Corvair?
Yes.
In my bed.
I think about when I'd be sitting on a cam.
I learned a lot in bed.
We have our epiphanies in the strangest places.
Well, our bed wasn't terribly strange.
Early 50s, wasn't it? 53, 54?
Yes, that's before I married Ed Cole. But the airbag I know all about because he invented it on the back of an envelope. And by the way, when they first developed the airbag, my husband put me in the front seat of the Oldsmobile that had the first prototype airbag. And it was a press conference. And I said, why did you ask me here? I have nothing to do with this. He said, well, we're going to test it on you. I said, I thought you liked me better than that. And he said, and well, if you say shit when that thing goes off, I will be really mad. And I said, well, that's going to be pretty tough. But he had a button and he punched the button and it blew off. And my glasses went this way, my blouse unbuttoned, and I thought, wow. But that was the first thing in front of the press for the airbag. And by the way, he never used a seat belt, and I use one every day because I like to live. And my son Nicholas was a volunteer fireman. He said everybody he pulled out of a car that was dead did not have on a seat belt, so I advise him. Anything else? And I appreciate your asking me here. I've had a good time. Food was marvelous. Thank you.